FEDSAS plays an important role in the governance and management of all schools in South Africa, in the sense that there are so many legal aspects and governance matters in education of which most principals and educators still have limited experience. It is important for a school to be a member of FEDSAS, as not only are we the leaders in school governance and management, but we also train, inform, guide and advise all our members in best practice and experienced solutions. Who is FEDSAS? FEDSAS is the national representative organization for school governing bodies. FEDSAS informs, organizes, mobilizes, and develops its members to achieve and maintain the highest international standards in school governance and management. We advise within the public and private educational sectors, focusing on the foundation, intermediate and senior phases. A school's governing body, or SGB, operates primarily outside the classroom. It is the SGB's task to make sure everything outside the classroom is in shape, that infrastructure, discipline, budgets, human resources and finances are efficiently managed. FEDSAS can assist you with all the aspects of your school governing board's primary role, which is creating a conducive environment in the best interest of the school. Furthermore, FEDSAS can assist in strategic planning, sound financial management and human resources aspects such as appointment, discipline and termination of contract processes. When dealing with appointments of principals, FEDSAS wants to support you to appoint the best possible leadership candidates for your school, for the sake of our children. Be a part of FEDSAS and know that you are part of a larger community that will always provide you with the latest information which is accurate and reliable. There is always someone within FEDSAS who has the experience of past challenges and solutions. Simply a call away. We at FEDSAS will walk alongside you to take your governing body forward to achieve greater heights. FEDSAS has extensive experience in education matters. As an active, dynamic organization, it is fully informed of developments and restructuring in the education field and can advise its members accordingly. FEDSAS is a democratic, non-political organization and members elect their leaders along the lines of the national school governing body elections. What does FEDSAS stand for? FEDSAS believes in maximum autonomy for governing bodies and therefore strives to expand governing bodies' rights, competencies and skills. FEDSAS supports and promotes governing bodies' powers and the rights as defined in the legal framework of the Constitution, South African Schools Act and acceptable governance principles. Former State President Nelson Mandela said, "Education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. Education is a great engine for personal development. Through education, the daughter of a peasant can become a doctor. Children of mine workers become heads of mines. The child of farm workers can become president of the country." Here at FEDSAS, we do what we do because we love our children, we love our schools, and we love our country. We look forward to being of service to every school governing body in South Africa.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Tech Talk session. And before I hand over to Riaan, let me just do the admin first. Today, we get a masterclass from the Resolute Education group. They are going to visit with us this afternoon. And just for your information, our managers, our provincial managers' contact details, please take it down. If you have any more questions, please contact them after the session. And then just again, this is a Q&A session, so please ask the questions. You have the opportunity now. Thank you. Riaan, over to you.
Dankie Ilse. Goeiemiddag almal. Good afternoon everybody. Yeah, it's all good and fun to be together again. Ons het nog nie so baie Tech Talks hierdie jaar gehad nie. En dis hoekom ons vanmiddag hierdie doen. We're gonna be probably presenting more in English because our presenters, Jonathan and Gareth, are going to be presenting in English. I think if we let them loose in the Afrikaans crowd, we might not understand robotics and coding that much. But thank you for everyone joining. We decided to do something different this term and not host a regular webinar. So we're going to try and change the flavor, change the idea of an online session. We're calling it a masterclass because I think we need to really upskill ourselves in this area. The Center for Technology has been around for quite a while, and we've been saying we've got to learn as we live. What's happening in our living spaces has got to be introduced in our learning spaces. And not only is robotics a real flavor of the month as far as the department and curriculum setting and that kind of thing goes, but it's also part of the learners of our time. I've got an 11 and 12-year-old at home. They grow up very different to the way I grew up. It's cell phones, it's Netflix, it's YouTube, Rubik's Cube is new again, 3D printers, all these things are becoming part of our lives. The skills that they got to obtain to live and work in the economy in 10, 15 years time are different than what we used to. So I'm very excited to have the team of Resolute with us today. I'm going to ask Gareth and Jono to open their screens and their microphones, and let's get started with this masterclass and showing off. I just want to maybe as an interest say that for the past few weeks we've been hosting mini STEAM days with the Resolute team at some of the events of Yaku Deacon traveling through the country in the provinces. I am absolutely astounded, amazed, overjoyed. My kop spin as ek sien wat gebeur met kinders. The kids are embracing the line following car like you cannot believe it. Rock, paper, scissors with the microbit. It is unbelievable. And one thing that sticks out, at some point in time, the teachers walk away from the table and they come tell me, look at the kids learning by themselves from each other. So I hope that we see some of that today. I'm going to not steal any more thunder. Jonathan is part of the Resolute team. He's going to lead us into this, and Gareth as well. He's going to showcase this masterclass for us. So guys, over to you. I'm going to turn off my video and just rock and roll. Let's have fun. If you can throw in one Afrikaans word, at least in the intro. I see we've got quite a bit of Afrikaans audience. But yeah, kom ons sê net baie dankie vir julle wat saam met ons is vandag. Guys, over to you.
Riaan, thank you so much for the introduction. I always appreciate it and absolutely love working with FEDSAS. We've had such a wonderful relationship since meeting several years ago. And it's just so cool to be part of all that you do for your members. I'm not sure if it's members and non-members logging in, but every time I attend a FEDSAS event, whether it be online or in person, I feel like I'm gaining. And I guess that's at the end of the day, the main drive behind what we do is about, what can we give back and what can we put in the space? Specifically from Resolute, I'm going to introduce myself, and then Gareth will say a little bit about himself. I'm going to then introduce Resolute Education as a whole, kind of give you guys the taste tester plate of all that we do. And then we're going to go into our masterclass. And what's quite exciting about the masterclass is we have my own master in-house taking us through a typical scenario that many teachers at the receiving end of a robotics and coding class either have received or will receive in the coming months, if not years. So who am I? My name is Jonathan du Plessis. I'm actually an English teacher by trade, and I've ended up, like many educators I will imagine will end up, in the space of coding and robotics. I'm very, very privileged to be part of business development and heading up business development as of 2022 until they realize that I'm not very good at what I do. But in reality, it's a fantastic space to be in. And just like many people, I think I completely discredited robotics and coding in my life. I was one of those kids who decided at 12, yeah, this space isn't for me. I'm going to do something completely different. Even today, I'm very, I wouldn't say anti-social media, but I don't spend a lot of time on it. And I thought that I was very, against robotics and coding until I walked into my first corporate job in marketing. I thought I was going to do a lot of finger guns and sell a lot of time, oddly enough, marketing packages for companies. And the first job I got landed with was I was put in charge of social media. So I thought, well, there we go. I went through my whole of high school trying to make sure I didn't do IT, didn't do CAT, wasn't involved in the internet space. And the first thing I walk into is, of course, tech. I have to say quite proudly, years later, I find the space absolutely fascinating. I'm so excited that it's being brought down into the space for learners because exposure to me is everything. I always say to schools that I could be the best figure skater, but until I put on skates, I'll never know. A kid could be the best football player, but until they kick a ball, they could go their whole life and not know that that was their calling. I don't want everybody to code. Well, maybe I do, but I do want everybody to have some form of coding literacy because we use so much to explore the world with, and I'll touch on that again a bit later. But so many kids discredit the space. Kids maybe like Gareth, who could have completely gone into a completely different field and not realized their passion for this wonderful and exciting space. So that being said, that's where I am at the moment. Gareth, can you tell us a little bit about you and how we've ended up to where we're at?
Yes. So goeiedag julle. I'll start off with a bit of Afrikaans. So my name's Gareth Thomson. So I'm an electronic engineer, and when I first got into engineering, obviously walked into the field and was absolutely lost. The reason why a lot of engineers go into engineering is because they say they were good at maths. And there's a lot of problems with that concept where people just go into a highly practical field without any practical knowledge. So me and Rajesh, my co-founder, really decided that, we needed to change that a little bit. A lot of people, the biggest problem with engineering is it's got a high dropout rate, and it's because people don't know what they're getting into. So we want to really bring this into the field of education to expose people to these highly practical and also very intellectually challenging subjects, even if it's just to open the door, just for like 90% of students in South Africa, to show them this technical field and also put something practical in front of them. Something that really just is super exciting, something that's practical in front of their face, and give them that opportunity to play and explore. And that's what really motivated myself and Rajesh to get into this field and give students that ability to break something and then get it to work afterwards. And that's a good reason. It's a good lead into what we're doing into the masterclass. We're going to be working with something that's broken, and we're going to try to get it to work. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. And then before we head into the actual practicalities of the masterclass, now ties in as to Gareth and Rajesh's vision into coding and robotics. It does sound a bit hipster, like we're saying we were into robotics and coding before it was cool, and everybody hopped on board. But in reality, they saw a need. And if we ever watched Robots, the Pixar film, it literally is the catchphrase is see a need, fill a need. And they saw a desperate need for coding and let's say robotic comprehension in the education space. I always say to prospective schools, just because a learner learns to write doesn't mean they become an author. Just because they learn to read doesn't mean they have to be a librarian. Correlation, is one factor. But in reality, we are currently all dialed in through a probably, to some of us, very mystical and magical device or devices. I would argue that there are approximately 120 odd people on this call. There are 120 odd cell phones close at hand. There's circuitry above us keeping the lights on. And on the way home, depending on where we're headed from here, there'll be a lot of technology and electronics as part of that on the way, navigation, in the ear, on the wrist, who knows. Again, coming from that background of saying that, oh, well, I'm very anti-tech, then working at a place like Resolute has made me realize that it's here to empower, not to hinder. Robotics, Resolute Education, Resolute Robotics, without being too sales pitchy, my background is in sales, is a 5-part service offering. And the most important thing that I have to cover at the beginning is when they saw this need, they saw the need for a curriculum. They saw the need for a actual academic exposure to coding and robotics, not just a novelty. EdTech is not a new field relatively in the last decade. Obviously it develops year on year, but in reality, it has been around. But how that applies to somebody's learning space and academic space had not really been covered to the extent that we've decided to go in with it. What naturally happened from there is if you've got an entire industry based on the practicalities of a subject, you need a practical element, and that's where our hardware came in. That's when we took a look at what existed in the edtech industry and said, where does this fall in at various different spaces, which meant that our curriculum from grade R to 12 has a practical element. You'll see today we'll be learning a bit about the Arduino and electronic circuitry, but it's very difficult to learn that if you're learning it from a piece of paper. If you're going to learn about cables, I want cables in front of me. If you're going to learn about microcontrollers, you're going to be coding to a microcontroller, which is where the kits come in. The next 3 parts have really been implemented to make us a cohesive solution for schools moving forward. That is, of course, our LMS system. I've made a career out of Rajesh proving me wrong. Our CEO said, Jono, what do you think about a video-based LMS system? And I said, we don't need to do that. We're a startup company. It's going to be a lot of effort to go into it. And we just focus on the classroom. He launched the website in February. And then in the March of the same year, lockdown happened. Luckily, no schools of ours had to stop teaching robotics and coding. I had to sit with egg on my face, but Rajesh could sit back, while robotics and coding and a lot of our initial pilot schools managed to continue throughout the period that we've all obviously experienced. The 4th aspect to our element is, of course, teacher training. Oftentimes, we talk about all these wonderful things and shake a lot of wonderful hands, but at the end of the day, a teacher will be standing in front of a classroom, teaching 20 learners, 40 eyeballs on focus and saying, hey, show me the future. And the teacher's going to go, okay, and see how it goes from there. And that ties in neatly with our 5th and final element, and going into our masterclass with Gareth, is a continued level of service and support. English, mathematics, and science, all to a certain extent, are really well ingrained in the academic space. It doesn't mean they're not going through cool, new, and exciting and innovative progress, but robotics and coding really is in its infancy. And that means we're learning with you. A solution that we might propose in 2022 may be really easy and novel in 2030. And we're going to keep moving forward with our schools in this technological space, because if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind. That being said, we're going to have a lot of schools starting robotics and coding, if you've not started already, into next year. And when you're standing in front of that classroom, you want to know you have support. Gareth will always say that you learn a lot more by failing than you do by succeeding first time. And this could not be truer than the space of robotics and coding. So today we're going to be going through a practical example of one of our courses that we used in the high school space, which is actually a watered down version of a 2nd or 3rd year, Gareth will correct me, engineering course that I've actually seen and spectated at a race at the Ola building at Tuckies. It is, of course, the autonomous line following rover, which is one of the first modules in our advanced course. Gareth, what are we looking at today?
Cool, thanks, Jono. Yeah, so just to give you a little breakdown, we have Arduino projects, and this is probably one of our more exciting ones because it moves and drives around and sometimes drives off of a table. And then we have that opportunity to fix problems. Everything's an opportunity, always remember that. Anyway, so we've got our Arduino over here, and it's got 2 motors on either side, and then a little Omni wheel at the back. I'll show you the bottom now. So you'll see there's 3 motors at the back there, and you can see I'm a fan of press stick, so that's everywhere. And then we've got 3 sensors in the front. So just to give you a little bit of what happened when we got this robot, it's currently it was turning to the left all the time. And that told us that it was turning to the right the whole time. So that told us that the left side or hemisphere of the robot needed a little bit of maintenance. And just through a little bit of testing, I saw that the IR sensor in the front and the relay at the back, I've just removed it now, weren't working properly. So the first thing that I like to do in troubleshooting and debugging is just pull out all the wires that don't make sense. Because the biggest thing when it comes to dealing with the student's problem is just sometimes they just put wires in the random places, and go back to the beginning of the video where it says setting up your IR sensors or setting up your relays. If you guys have any questions about technical terms, I'll walk you guys through just a teensy bit of the theory that what is an IR sensor and what is a relay, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Cool. John, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I think what's wonderful is even though I've been involved with Resolute since its genesis, I really am here to represent the everyman. I often don't get to sit in the back and go through a lot of these projects with Gareth, and every time I do, he's got wonderful ways of explaining advanced concepts to me, and by extent, really simplifying these areas for everyone else. So in essence, what we've got in front of us is an autonomous line following rover. It uses infrared sensors as well as the Arduino microcontroller to navigate its way around a track. To my understanding, Gareth, please correct me if I'm wrong, the infrared sensors at the front have been programmed to stay on the black, which is recognized as a value using the IR sensors, and stay off the white, thus propelling it along. But could you explain to us a little bit more about what infrared means and how is it being applied in this space in a more technical sense?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so I'm not going to nitpick at you, Jono, but just one thing, we don't program these sensors over here. These sensors are like passive little sensors. And then over here, we program this little chip over here in the middle of the car to read from these sensors. So I'll see if I can give you guys a little bit of clarity. I've just pulled this off of another robot. So this is just a little IR sensor. It's got a transmitter and a receiver in the front of it, which we have pointing down to the ground. And my best analogy for that is essentially, think of this as a potentially somebody that doesn't have the ability to see, speak, or feel. So now what we're going to try and do is we're going to introduce sensors to it, such as these little IR sensors. And the best analogy for this is imagine yourself in a dark, dark cave, and you've got a torch. Now, where you point that torch is where you'll be able to see, because the light, the transmitter, your torch in this instance, will shine light onto a surface, and then the light will bounce back into your retina, your eyes, and that will be the receiver. So then you've got a little bit of circuitry on the back of this little guy over here, and that will essentially just take all of that gobbledygook of photons and light and just give it into a simple digital signal. And that's great because that's what our Arduino is going to do over here. So is there any other questions? Are you okay with that explanation, Jono?
That's perfect, but I'd like to know then in this case, what you think has gone wrong with our infrared sensors.
Yeah, so when I first saw it, was the
lefty.
Sorry?
Sorry, is it lefty or is it righty?
It was currently spinning right, so the left sensor was just damaged, yeah. So I've just replaced the sensor, fantastic. But I did that off camera because I don't want you guys to watch me do a bunch of nutting and bolting. I'd rather have you guys see me do some wiring. Favorite job is to do live wiring. No, I'm joking. Do it on camera. So essentially, I'm just going to turn the car over. We've got some female to male cables over here, and I've just threaded it through the chassis because it's a little bit difficult to do it post wiring. And then there's easily labeled components on the front here. Sorry, I don't know if you guys can see this. Zoom in there a little bit. There's some labels and text over here. In the recorded videos, everything is a little bit clearer because it's focused and there's no live class over there. Okay, so generally we like to stick with standard color conventions. So I like to use white for 5 volts, black for ground, and then any arbitrary color for data. So we've got a gray cable there. And it clips in quite neatly and it's quite resilient. Like I can shake the robot and it will stay on there. So generally that's something that is super helpful in the classes. When you make a move, you want it to stay. Then you can see I've got a plethora of wires. Looks like I'm wiring a bomb. It's also important to take note of the colors that you are currently working with. I'll zoom out a little bit there on this one. So we had ground, which was black, and this existing project, we're just using 2 rails for our power. So I'm going to pull black out and I'll put that into my negative rail, which I've already connected to ground on our Arduino, or which was already connected. Then white was connected to 5 volts. And then this last one, if I remember correctly, and I'll just have to draw up our code. Sorry, let me just get to our code over there. Generally, you have all of this code when you are onto the platform. We have everything easily labeled. So I'm not sure if you guys can see the text. If you can't, I'll zoom in a little bit more. And I've got my sensors over here. We use the word analog read because we want to read, essentially the world is always an analog. We want to read that analog information. And I'm working with the left sensor. So that I'm going to be plugging into left IR sensor, which is my A2 on the robot. And that should plug in there nice and easily. So I'm just going to turn on the car over here. Now I understand that this is like a little bit dive into the deep, but this project is something that we do at the end of our grade 9 curriculum. So just something to take note of. I will pop over to the main overhead view here quickly so you guys can see. Over here, with these little lights that you see on the front here, you'll see that there's a plethora of lights. And when you put your hand in front of it, you should see another LED turn on. So this wasn't happening on the other sensor. So you can see now that that light is bouncing back, it's actually triggering the threshold. And that's super helpful. So when you guys pull this across the track here, you'll see all of the lights are on when it's on white. As it goes over to black, you can see that triggers. And there we've got another one going off and so on. So now we can just take these 3 values in. I'm not going to run through all of the code for you because that does take essentially a term to go through. So I can see that my sensor is working in practical sense. Now let's go see it work in theoretical. So I can open up my terminal over here. And the biggest thing that you want to do with this is we've got auto calibration set up. If I see the word white pop up, that's super positive. Line it up with black, push the black cable, and then go over to green. And you'll see that it now wants to go. So now it's going forward. F stands for forward. If I move it to the left, then you'll see that it wants to move to the left and go to the right. So this wasn't happening earlier. We didn't get the L letter. So now with the replacement of the sensor, we can see we've got the decision making. So we've got this inputs, so our eyes are working and our brain is working because the code was working flawlessly in the beginning. So it was only a hardware issue. So essentially we've taken an eye out of the robot and we've replaced that. So super gross analogy, but that's what we just did. Cool.
Awesome. Okay, cool, Gareth. So problem number 1 is solved. The eye is now working. We're going to get to the reaction in a bit because obviously there's a little bit more wrong with the autonomous line following rover that you've been presented with. And in the shoes of a teacher, you've been presented with the faulty hardware. But you said something quite important to me recently. You said that it's actually not necessarily the teacher's job to then go ahead and fix it. Can you repeat what you said to me earlier?
Yes, yeah, no, of course. So we don't expect our teachers to be engineers, but we do expect our students to be. So that over there says it all. What the goal for this little project over here is to try and get students to solve their own problems and really for the teachers to just be familiar with the curriculum. So how we guide teachers in our teacher training is find the best and the brightest students. And because they're going to run ahead through the syllabus, just slow them down with solving all the problems in the class. That's not your job. That's their job now. Believe me, it teaches them so much more by fixing other kids' problems, and also other students learn. It's not somebody coming in and telling them what's going on. So as I'm doing a debugging video here, I don't expect teachers to be able to do this debugging. What I do is I expect the students to be able to do the debugging. It's very important for the learning process. If they want to be an engineer, or if they want to go into highly technical fields, or if they just want to be able to be super useful in the 4th Industrial Revolution, it's the ability to solve problems. And sometimes with practical stuff, those problems are really, really difficult. So there's like 3 elements to it. So yeah, if it's deep ending the students, it's, to be honest, that's really good, because when you go into industry, that's all there is. There's no shallow end when it comes to your first job or even your 5th year.
I have a second question before we move on to problem number 2 of debugging. Is obviously we've gone into depth on a particular subject right now, but a lot of teachers are signing in. I know that some educators who are being presented the robotics and coding portfolio, they have some experience maybe with IT, but the same is also true for educators that I've met who maybe studied to teach science, English, or history, and they've been presented with the robotics and coding portfolio. Something we try to do at Resolute is we try to demystify a lot of senses. And what we have in front of us right now, the environment that Gareth is working is called an IDE, specifically the Arduino IDE. So Gareth, in layman's terms, what is an IDE? I'm sure I'm not the first person to bring this up for our educators today.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, so quite a while back, let's say probably 30 to 40 years ago, there were a lot of programmers really just like out there. The internet was very new, and what was essentially happening is everybody was building their own tools. They would build their own hammers and screwdrivers and drill bits. And eventually they started coming up with this idea of pulling the best tools together. And so I'll just give you the acronym. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. Essentially alphabet soup to you, lots of big words. But essentially what happened once people started creating these epic tools and started identifying the best ones, they started integrating them into sort of one garage or one toolbox that we could literally copy and paste and send around the world and give everybody not just a screwdriver, but the best screwdriver, one that's going to last the longest or help exactly with what you want the screwdriver to do. And they developed this environment with all of the best tools and they integrated into one place. And that's what these IDEs are. There's a range of them for different languages. This one is based on the Arduino language, is essentially a derivative of C++, which is an industry standard language for controllers. And the Arduino IDE really simplified it down to what does a DIY person or a student or a teacher need to get the Arduino to do what they want it to do. So they've taken a lot of unnecessary tools. So you don't have like a drill press and a this and a that. They've just really given you what you need to get the Arduino to function. So that's what this is. It's an extremely helpful tool with all the correct bells and whistles, not just bells and whistles on your computer. Very easy to use and just super wonderful. One of my favorite IDEs because of how simple it is and how to the point it is. Yes.
Fantastic. Thanks, Gareth. So Jono's tidbits to the teachers out there who are maybe being presented with this is when you hear IDEs being thrown around in the literature, it's essentially the ideal programming portal to execute this task. If you wanted to write a document, you would go to Word. If you wanted to do a PowerPoint, you would go to PowerPoint or slides. And if you wanted to program to an Arduino, you would use the Arduino IDE. Am I on the right track here, Gareth?
100%, yeah. It's just another software application to help you. Yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. All right, guys, so we've fixed the infrared sensor, essentially the eyes. But what we're noticing is that the eyes are recognizing the left, rights, and the straights, but nothing's happening. Can you explain to us why we're not moving along the track at this stage?
Yeah, okay, cool. So just going back to the human anatomy, we fixed the eyes, so that's great. The brain is working fine. Now, because this is a input, process, output system, so you've got your inputs, your processor, and then your outputs, I've disconnected the legs essentially. So we've got a left and a right leg, and currently the left leg isn't working. Sorry, my orientation would be best like this. So the left leg wasn't working because of the sensor and something else was wrong with the wheel. Well, the motor is absolutely fine. That was tested earlier, but we're missing another one of these little guys over here, the relay. Now I said the word relay earlier. Essentially a relay is a mechanical switch. So inside this little blue box over here is a coil that we trigger, and you'll see that there's little lights on here. There's a red light and a green light. And when that turns on, it closes the switch, essentially closes the circuit to power the motor. So you can think, if you guys have done a little bit of circuitry, you've got a battery, then you've got a little switch in between the battery and the load, in this instance, the motor. Sometimes you can have it as a light. And all we're going to be doing is closing that switch, letting current go through the circuit and turning the motor. And that's what this little guy over here does. It is really, really helpful, and it's really great at electrically isolating. So tip number one, whenever you've got your Arduino plugged in and you start touching wires, unplug the Arduino, because you can damage a lot of components by having that plugged in. And then just going back to, let me see if I can get that to focus. So you've got these little bits of writing over here, VCC, GND, and IN. That just stands for voltage, because you need some energy coming from somewhere. It needs to go somewhere, and then how to use it. So that IN is essentially our digital pin. So I'm going to place it on there, put some press stick at the bottom. Double-sided tape works really great, but if you're going to plan on reusing these kits, press stick is the best, just because, yeah, that's something that's not permanent fastening, it's just temporary, but it'll allow you to put the robot upside down and carry on playing. Cool. So just to start off with that wiring, I've got these wires plugged in over here. I've got my ground and power given, and I've got the digital pin going to my 10th pin here. I'll explain that in the code in a little bit. So I've got my orange going to 5 volts and red going to ground. So I'm just going to plug those in, and I have successfully plugged in all of these little wires. Give it a little bit of a tug test, it looks fine. And now on closing the switch. So this little red wire over here is connected to my DC motor over there, and the black wire is just going to ground in that little mess of wires over there. So this is the one side of the switch that I need to connect. And then the other side of the switch, I've just got connected to the one other relay. Sorry, a little camera there is connected to this other relay over there. So I'm just going to bunny hop that cable into this other relay, give that a bit of a tighten. And essentially with this relay, common or COM on this side over here is the point we want to give power. And then the NO, which stands for normally open, is when it isn't given power, the switch remains open. And then as soon as you give it power, it closes the circuit, thus allowing the load to be powered, in this case, a motor. So I'm just going to plug that back in there. Sorry if you see the top of my head a lot. And just going to tighten that. Give that a bit of a tug. Good test is to always pull on your wires when you know where they're supposed to go. If you don't know where the wires shouldn't go, don't pull the wires because then you're going to get more and more lost. Okay, cool. So now I'm just going to plug this bad boy in, do another sanity test, and I'm just going to walk you through the code of what was going on with that 10th pin. So what we've done in our code is we've gone and allocated variables to numbers. So essentially, my left motor, I connect to pin 10, and that'll be pin 10 on the Arduino. And then my right motor was connected to pin 9, but that didn't require any damage. So if you plug it into the wrong pin or you don't have that pin available, you just change one number here, and through the rest of your code, you're pretty much sorted. Cool. So now I think we're pretty much ready to test. The one thing that I always like to do, especially when it comes to dealing with this, is I always unplug the power to my relays that will essentially be powering the motor, because when I'm programming it, I really don't want this thing to drive off. And that's always the most irritating thing. So now that I'm happy with this code, I'm going to plug this in. Also, always make sure that your multimeter is got some power in it. Sorry, not your multimeter, your power bank has got some charge in it. We'll zoom out a little bit over there. And I'm going to plug this into here. Plug that back into where I get power. Always fun when it starts driving, but you can see now both motors are turning, but it's not going to follow the line. So we just need to calibrate it. So I push white over there, black over there, and green for go. Oh, okay, sorry, I don't have a lot of disk space. And then you can see.
Yeah, that's a beautiful visual, man, and well done. There's nothing like coding under pressure, so I'm glad that he did follow the line. That's always a good advocacy. There's a lot to be said though for if Gareth wasn't able to get it the first time. You don't learn nearly as much, and I know I'm speaking to a lot of educators who are on today, from getting it right every time, but getting it wrong really helps progress moving forward. What's wonderful about the LMS-based system is we've had a top-down demonstration, and now we're going to have a code demonstration from Gareth on executing this project. Now, I would argue if you took all of us now to write down a quick test out of 10 marks for what Gareth has just demonstrated, you find it rather difficult. What's really cool is Gareth is one of our first and still lead presenters in all of our academic content. So if you'd like, I can arrange a demo access for you at the end of the conclusion of the day. And if you happen to have an Arduino set at hand or nearby on autonomous line following rover, you can be able to pause, rewind, and slow down or speed up the video-based tutorials where demonstrators such as Gareth can show you and your learners how to progress through these particular projects.
Yeah.
Gareth, is that a fixed autonomous line following rover?
Yes, completely working now.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I didn't run through the
Awesome.
code too much because it is kind of complicated. And if you guys ever felt lost, I mean, this is a masterclass. This is at the end of a course. This is like right at the end. And that sense of fulfillment of getting that car to drive forward, or even just the periodic stages of just getting the car to move and drive off the table and all those little things, getting little lights to flicker. It's such a euphoric experience in the classroom. And when one student gets it, it really inspires a lot of other students because it seemed impossible in the beginning, and that's probably what you're feeling right now. But there's that snowball effect in the classroom. One student gets it, then the next two students, and then pretty much 5, 10, and everybody's got it. There's always 1 or 2 students that are just lagging behind, but seriously, just put them in front of the kid that got it first, and you have a 100% success rate. And that's something that we focus on here in Resolute, is we just want to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to succeed. There's a lot more you can do with this robot, like you can add, ultrasonic sensors, servo motors, and the plethora of other things. But for the students that you just want to see if they get that understand how all of this code sort of works over here, where just lines and lines of code, the car is fantastic because it shows a plethora of understanding. And at the end of the day, it's not insanely hard. It's just something that takes a little bit of time and just a teensy bit of passion.
Dudes and dudettes, ladies and gentlemen, that is 40 minutes of Masterclass with Gareth on the autonomous line following rover. Now, 2 things. Number 1, we specifically wanted to host this from this top-down view to show you guys a practical aspect and a more realistic classroom aspect of what can be expected in learning this environment. Number 2 is that in partnership with FEDSAS, we want to continue to demystify and add value to this wonderful community. So what I would love to do is open the floor for questions. I know Riaan always has some absolute bangers that are always ready to go. But then also for any ideas or topics that you feel need more or further demystification, if that's even a word, in the space of coding and robotics. I'm privileged to have such a wonderful team in my R&D department, such as Gareth, who can demystify these topics that we might just take for granted, whether it be what is 4IR, what are the practical aspects. No question is a stupid question. It only further sheds light on coding and robotics. How's it going, Riaan? How's the traffic?
It is good. I'm parked next to the road in the heart of Pretoria. I had a meeting with the Department of Basic Education earlier, but I've got to rush home to see a choir festival, which my daughter is singing in. So I've been listening and watching. I'm about 3 blocks away from where I started. Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Gareth. I think a different angle into how do we fix things that are wrong, and I want to maybe just lift our eyes to our world. And I think this is what we need to teach our learners. There's a lot wrong with our world that needs fixing, and sometimes we want to always just teach to the test and make sure that we get better marks and more marks. So yeah, there's our CEO popping in a note there. Well done to Resolute. So I think the angle is that of, is there something wrong around us that needs fixing? So thank you for that angle. The question that I have for you, and a little bit of a banger if you call it that, coding is not new. I'm going to give away my age now, but I did matric in 1988 in this wonderful country, and I did basic coding in 1987 and 1988. Why is coding suddenly more relevant, suddenly more attracted to where we are in this world? Yeah, just give us a little bit of an angle on why it's the flavor of the month, because there's a learning curve into that. Please shed some light on that.
Thank you so much, Riaan. That's a great question. Yeah. So, I mean, my best philosophy around why programming is becoming so prevalent in today is obviously because of the age of computers. I mean, the age of computers has been around since the early 90s, late 80s. But now it's becoming more and more and more ingrained. And with artificial intelligence and these more hyper-technical tools coming out there, like if you guys think of your emails, how many of you spend a good 2 hours on emails a day? Bots and new technologies are coming out there to help you automate responses, so help you better process spam, how to better respond to other technologies. And through programming, or at least programming-esque softwares, you can really save yourself time. One of our, what's it called, co-founders or shareholders, Adam Pantanowitz, he's been coining the phrase, technology is slow until it is sudden. And the biggest thing with coding is you don't want to be left behind, but also it's not an industry killer. Another thing that he coined is the best people in industries are the ones that integrate with technology. So you don't want to be seen as somebody that leaves it behind and pushes it aside. Really, every industry is now moving into a computer-based or a tech-based situation. I mean, farming, agriculture has just become like a huge data mining project where there's bots in almost every row of crops. And, you know, every industry you point to, there isn't one that you can say the computer's not used. And that's why I think programming, especially learning those technical skills, or at least being not afraid of technology, is extremely important. And coding is a great way to test without, you know, going too expensive, and also something that's not hyper technical. You don't have to have degrees to do it.
What I would like to add to that, and that's from seeing your mini STEAM day with the kids. We had competitions with grade 3s with matric pupils in the same room, and they all compete. So it's multidisciplinary, multi-grade, multi-level, and they all compete at the same pace, or different pace, but at the same competition at the end of the day. So here is a challenge that I want to throw out. What are we teaching kids? Are we teaching them robotics and coding, or are we teaching them a level of the 4 C's of the 21st century, which is problem solving or critical thinking, creativity? I think they love playing with something that has lights and bells and whistles, and collaboration. They work in a team. And then communication. You know, we need communication as a skill, but yet we teach language. Maybe we should teach communication. Are we teaching coding or robotics, or are we teaching a deeper level of learning with in the age of our time, or the time that we're living in? Maybe just speak to that. What is this the underlayer of teaching that happens in your opinion and your experience?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I'd say there's a lot of soft skills that are passively learned, especially when you put somebody or a student or a group of students into something that seems impossible. I think the harder the challenge at first glance, the more opportunity there is to learn. And I think, that's why we always say, you know, something's broken in front of you, don't see it as a broken thing, see it as an opportunity. I would say definitely with robotics, even with the grade 3s, with block-based programming, there's that sequential thought that's happening, which teaches them to think step by step through a problem. And step-by-step thought helps in pretty much any aspect, or any field of industry, I mean. And then obviously with communication, yes, because it's so complicated, if you're telling somebody to just drag blocks onto a screen, clear instruction, and, you know, explaining why this isn't working to another student is just only going to improve communication, because they're using hyper technical terms. So they have to like deal with jargon, but they also have to break it down into something that's a little bit more comprehensible. And that's, you know, a hyper technical field like programming teaches soft skills at a faster, a more rapid rate, in my opinion, because I've seen it happen. These students are they're using, like, you open up the serial monitor and then and they just use these words like they're flowing off the tongue, but they've also built this understanding of what is a serial monitor, or like John likes to bring up, the IDE, these acronyms that we throw around. That's something that's super helpful in communication, is they go and they understand, they build an understanding, and then they work off from there. And yes, sometimes you get the students that walk in a year later and they're like, these kids are on another level. How do I speak to them? And you'll find that students are very understanding when it comes to a new subject with jargon. They're very helpful. They're really happy to explain IDE, serial monitor, variables, all complicated technical terms, because it's almost like a bragging session. And students, if anything, love to brag or distract. You know, you get one of the two. And if they can do it two at the same time, you're hitting all the nodes. Yeah.
Gareth, Jonathan, I don't see any questions in the Q&A box. I don't know if Santi or Ilse can confirm that. But I think the takeout for me is we've got a world full of problems. And maybe we should have kids get creative, critically thinking about how to solve those problems. And then we should not miss the curve. Technology is slow until it is sudden. And there's a quantum leap in that. And if we as schools and leaders and HGB members, decision makers at school, wait for something to gradually dawn on us, we might miss the boat or miss the ship. The department is talking about this being rolled out in all provinces and all grades by 2025, if I'm not mistaken. My challenge to decision makers at schools is, let's not wait for the department to teach us what we need to do in any case. We need to teach our children. Let's not have the department be the gold standard. And I'm not saying that they're doing anything wrong, but there's nowhere a curriculum for choir, chess, rugby, and hockey at a school. Yet we want to wait for the curriculum document to say what we should do with coding and robotics. We teach a lot in sports and other activities to our learners. You know, my kid learns about teamwork and everything in rugby and cricket. My daughter learns about listening to other people in choir and the art projects that she does at school. Let's allow the kids to also learn the soft skills and other fundamentals as part of this process. Jonathan, as it closing, I think we're out of time now, but how can people reach you? What solutions do you have? I think we've got very much a tier-based solution in the Resolute team as far as where to start, 6 years old, 8 years old, 10, 12. The online classes, a model for schools at curricular level or at post-curricular level, just in about 30 minutes, 30 seconds to a minute. Just give us the opportunity to connect with you.
So you can reach us at Resolute, www.resolute.education. If I'm not mistaken, I do mess up URLs. So that's an easy way to get through, or info@resolute.education. No .com, not .coza, education's where it's at, and that's how you get hold of us. I'm sure that we can send a list to attendees as well of how to get in touch and chat to us about our solutions. At the very least, guys, as we face this new and impending, or for some of you already implemented subject, whether it be extramural or in curriculum, no question is a stupid question or a silly question. Resolute loses nothing in advising you along the right path. I know that schools feel an overwhelming pressure to do something, and any start is better than none. But don't be afraid to ask whether or not a microcontroller is the right move, whether you need to start considering certain tech over others. For me, my team are encouraged to add value. So if you ask a question, I have a wonderful team at my disposal. So rather than you spend your weekends diving down Google rabbit holes, reach out to us. Just ask those questions. I promise you, we won't say, well, buy 4 of these and then find out. It will be a sense of adding value to your experience and how you progress from there. I think that I don't want, and I've already been in the situation where I visit schools who have thrown a lot of money, have thrown a lot of time and effort, and ultimately are just slightly misaligned to what we feel is relevant, whether it be the draft curriculum, which I see there's a question based on, or whether it be just the direction in general for what is ultimately best for our schools and our learners. We want them going and leaving even into the FET phase or into the job market with a fundamental understanding of coding and how it and robotics and how it feeds into their space as an adult, so that they feel well informed and they can navigate it more easily. That's the goal at the end of the day.
Wonderful. One email address, resolute.education is your website. Who can they contact? I like that question about the other parts of the syllabus. I don't think we've got time to deal with it. So yes, there's a minimum compliance with a draft, call it curriculum policy, but I think there's a higher level of functioning that some of our schools need to aim at, and they can contact you. Jono, your email address or someone at the office?
info@resolute.education, and somebody will get back to you following your question. If you want to speak directly to me, it's just Jonathan@resolute.education or Gareth@resolute.education. You guys can get through to us, and we'll make sure that we assist you along the path of what is robotics and coding in 2022/2023. Now we're almost there.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Guys, I'm going to wrap up the session. Ilse is going to close for us, but thank you so much for sharing with us and getting your hands dirty. I think it's a critical issue. I want to invite the audience. If we haven't been to your province yet and we've got a mini STEAM day that's happening close to you, contact us. My email address is tech@fedsas.org.za. Make sure you get hold of either myself or your provincial manager. Ilse will share the details. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day. And yes, let's keep thinking forward and fixing problems. Cheers, everybody.
Thanks,
Take care,
Riaan.
guys. Thank you.
Jonathan,
Bye.
Gareth, thank you very much. Thank you, Riaan. Let me quickly just share our contact details. The provincial manager's details there, and in the right bottom is Riaan's details. If you have any more questions or you want to contact them, please do so. Thank you to everybody and enjoy your afternoon. Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Thanks.
Bye-bye.